So good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to the people in Japan. Today, me and my colleague Dayana are going to talk about the effects of the COVID-19 crisis in the academic field. And we are going to present some solution that can help to construct a education system that can face a possible crisis in the future. So in our presentation, we're going to cover different topics, starting with explaining why education is so important in our societies, and then we are going to talk about this possible solution to implement a secure education system. And then we're going to offer some empirical data about the effects of the COVID-19 in the education sector. And as a conclusion, we're going to show how this crisis can also be seen as an opportunity in order to improve our universities institutions. So to start, why do we talk about education? We talk about education because it is a central element in our societies. In fact, thanks to it, both governments and individuals are able to build a human capital and to kickstart the economic recovery of a country. And moreover, it is possible, thanks to education, to protect the most vulnerable categories. However, as a consequence of this crisis, nowadays the world's human capital is highly at risk, and the economic repercussions will last for the years to come. Next slide, please. The effects of this crisis can be observed mainly by the fact that the major part of the countries opted for school closure and to the transition from campus-based lectures to remote learning. Even though this solution have helped to mitigate the crisis effects, on the other hand, they also have increased the disparities between the students from lower income backgrounds and those from higher income ones. In fact, this disparity can be mainly observed by taking into consideration the different perception that the university institutions had in the transition from campus-based lectures to online lectures. This difference is mainly due to the degree of investments that the governments and countries had previously made in the education and digitalization sectors. In fact, in all those countries in where a strategic approach towards digitalization lacks, the challenges are more complex to face, whereas on the other hand, institutions that have an effective teaching and learning system found themselves better prepared in order to face this transition. So next slide. During the crisis, the main solution applied in the education sector has been the transition to remote learning, and among the other solutions, we can mention the introduction of innovative and creative ways to learn at home, for example, through interactive apps, online television broadcasts, and online classrooms. Another solution has been the upgrade of the ICT education infrastructure, where ICT stands for Information Communication Technologies. And this has been possible thanks to the partnership between public and private institutions. And in fact, during the crisis, many firms in the education sector have offered their support to institutions and students, offering free access to online courses. And then another solution has been the mitigation of inequality. This is a very important point because the governments have prioritized those students at risk of dropping out of the education because they didn't have the resources in order to access to online classrooms. So by prioritizing these students, they have the governments have kept these students engaged with education, and they have prevented future economical losses. Next slide. Nevertheless, even though some results have been achieved in the mitigation of the effects of the crisis, the governments should continue to focus mainly in order to achieve three goals that are assuring a continuity of learning, accommodating finances to support targeted interventions, and then building resilience in order to ensure a strong education system. So as regards the first goal, the continuity of learning, we can say that online learning, next slide, could be used to mitigate the loss of learning and to maintain students engaged with education. And this goal can be achieved, for example, through the solution that you can see in the slide. For example, by sharing the sharing of educational material and resources among institutions. In fact, thanks to a better coordination at the national level, as well as sharing experiences and information among different countries, can contribute to face the infrastructural challenges that this crisis has posed. In the slide, I mentioned a letter sent to the European Commission from the European Parliament member states. And in this letter, they are demanding for a clear action regarding the access to education. They are demanding for the creation of a common platform that nowadays doesn't exist, in which the material and the resources can be shared in order to allow countries that lack the resources to have access to a better access to education. Then another solution could be the one of providing support to institutions whose countries lack the resources. And another important solution are the internationalization at home measures. In fact, it's not a mystery that the mobility restriction have highly affected international education. And according to two different surveys, the first one is from the European Association for International Education. More than the 70% of the responses affirms that both inbound and outbound mobility students have been affected, highly affected as an effects of the crisis. And then the second survey from the European Student Network, ESN, affirmed that 1 out of 4 exchange period have been cancelled since the outbreak of the COVID-19, and almost half of the students that have been able to leave for their exchange have had many problems connected to the COVID-19, as for example finding accommodation or problems connected to the transportation. Then another solution is to assure equity, as we said before, by providing devices and internet solution to all those students that do not have access to technology. And for example, the University of Bologna did this by distributing free SIM cards to students that didn't have access to the internet. Next slide, please. As regards the second goal, the financing, governments should balance their budget in order to fund the education system and to prevent further increasement in inequalities. In fact, an insufficient financing in teaching and learning will harm post-crisis economies in a definitive way, and this will have a negative impact on, for example, countries' competitiveness and development. Moreover, government must stabilize their economy during and mainly after the crisis, when the difference between higher education institutions and the lower education institution will become, even just higher education institution will become more apparent. Moreover, the development of an high-performing digital education ecosystem should be fostered. In fact, according to a study by the OECD, that stands for Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, less than half of the educators feel ready to use technologies while teaching. And 1 out of 5 students across the European Union don't reach a basic level of digital skills. So a solution could be the one of creating a more digital education ecosystem that nowadays still lacks in many countries. Then as regards to the last goal, next slide, the building of resilience, we can say that this is the most important goal, as it aims as ensuring a high quality education system in a post-crisis era and preventing future crises to undermine the continuity of learning. In fact, in the future, remote learning will probably be a common modality for many learners. And but how can we ensure an high quality education system that includes also e-learning? We can do it by cooperating. The answer is cooperation. In fact, this cooperation can be implemented, for example, through cross-border collaboration and partnership within universities, institutes from different countries. And moreover, thanks to cooperation, as we said before, those countries that lacks the resources can be helped by those countries that have more advanced learning systems in terms of both substance and quality. Next slide, please. So COVID-19 has to be considered also as an opportunity to strategically prepare for the challenges to come. And here we have the discourse of the thought of two higher education experts, Brown and Salmi, who says that institution would be well advised not to consider the COVID-19 pandemic as a once in a lifetime crisis. This crisis will serve as a wake-up call to reassess the vulnerabilities of the higher education sector and the challenges of living in a global and interdependent world. Next slide, please. So an example of successful cooperation in the education sector is the Bologna Process. That is one of the main reasons why the European and Central Asia region is nowadays in a more favorable situation than many other regions of the world. But what is this Bologna Process? It's a cooperation that aligns most national higher education system, giving them a joint direction for development, making them more compatible, and offering them a joint language for communicating for the communication between the institutes. So this cooperation has radically changed higher education since it has the declaration has been signed in the 1999, and the result achieved by the countries cooperating in this process demonstrates the importance of collaboration in facing global crisis. Now I leave the floor to my colleague Dayana.
Okay, thank you so much, Edoardo. So we know that all the crises are very sad and have a negative impact, but today we are trying to focus on the positive things of the crisis, in the positive opportunities. To do this, I will show you the technical aspects of this COVID to make a reflection about that, and we take in consideration the International Association of universities that made a global survey report about the impact of COVID-19 on higher education around the world. To do this, they take in consideration 424 universities and other higher education institutions based in 111 countries and territories. So this report was made 1 year before almost. So it's the first time that it was talking about the impact of the crisis, and it was the first part of the crisis. Okay, so this is the beginning, and the main findings are very interesting, and we are divided by categories. So the first one is the partnerships. Okay, 64% of HIGs, that it has the high education institutes, reported that COVID-19 weakened partnerships. But there is 18% that reported that actually strengthened them, and 31% believes that actually COVID-19, instead of weakened partnerships, create new opportunities of partnerships. And this is a very interesting point, because maybe thanks to the crisis and thanks to the necessity to get in touch, a lot of institutes and universities strained partnerships and opportunities with institutions that in the past it was impossible, and maybe because of the physical and financial issues. So this is a very interesting first point. Talking about international student mobility, that I know that we're talking a lot about this, and we all know that actually has a negative impact in this. Actually, 89% of HIGs tell that the mobility of the student international mobility was low, but we have to focus on the 60% of HIGs that reported that COVID-19 actually increases virtual mobility and collaborative online learning. Okay, we know that maybe this is not a very good way, an alternative to exchange, but we have to remember that we are in the middle of the informational era. So in the informational era, maybe the human experience could be changed, and the main global objective is to exchange information, and this is increased by the 60%, and it's not low. The regions that are working more harder about this in the virtual mobility and online mobility is Asian Pacific, that is actually the first one region, followed by Europe, that has a percentage as 59%. And if in one hand, the number of international students is decreasing, but in the other hand, there is, as Edoardo said, the opportunity to further develop internationalization at home. That is maybe the activities that we are doing right now, with an exchange of Asia, Europe, even at home. So it could be impossible to think about in the past, but we are doing this right now. So I think that it's actually an opportunity. We need to take into consideration even what was the challenge of this transition into distance teaching and learning. And even here, we know that this could be actually in a little bit part could be actually a good thing, because COVID-19 is like a boost for data sharing and ICT adoption, that were projects that all the high institutes and universities were thinking in the past. Okay, how to improve the education, how to improve the technology in the education and learning, but all the projects were really slowly times. Okay, and COVID was like an accelerator in all of these processes, and I think that actually an accelerator, even if it's a sad accelerator, is always a good thing. To do this, there is a lot of challenges. Distance learning is a challenge on competencies and pedagogies, because we have to change the mood, change the way that we use to teach and to get an explanation and to get in touch. It changed the languages and it changed the communication in the relationships between the persons. So it's not the same to have a physical interaction and have a digital interaction. It's not impossible to do that, but we have to change method. And we didn't have a method. Not all the universities had a method before. So all of them are using the learning by doing. That is something like, okay, we have to try and see in the future what is better and what is not better. And for the beginning, the quality suffered the consequences about this, because less quality has been shown in the first part of distance learning. As Edoardo said, the technical infrastructure and accessibility is always a problem when we are talking about distance learning, and we have to focus on digital divide. Okay, digital divide were exist years ago, but it shows more important just in this moment of distance learning, and not just distance learning, but distance life becomes really vital. So in the academic field, we can see two different trends. Students don't have access to internet from home in the countries or maybe the places where infrastructure problems are really high. Or even in the countries with good internet penetration, maybe not all the students have the instruments to optimize the distance learning. So this could these have financial implication of investing in tools and online licenses and research and create new tools. Not all the countries and not all the universities have the possibility to invest in it. So some universities in some countries interrupted their activities because it was like, okay, if all of the students cannot to get access to education, no one can, before we can solve this problem. I'm talking about distance learning and quality of distance learning, of the possibility to develop a good distance learning is complicated because, as our colleague said before, maybe it's not the same and it's not a quality teaching, but we have to consider even the field of the study. Okay, there are fields of studies like medicine, laboratory, chemical sciences that need the physical learning because they depend on the physical learning to develop their knowledge. But there are some fields when practice actually can easily be replaced by distance teaching, because it's just an exchange on information of our development information thinking and behavior. It's not about do experiments in laboratory. So maybe we need to consider even the field of study and consider the possibility that not all could be less quality. Focus on the research that is actually our main topic. Yeah, COVID-19 has a very negative impact because 80% of HICE reported that HICE canceled international travels, canceled scientific conferences, canceled a lot of projects that implicates physical presence. But while physical research is in danger or is cancelled, intellectual research is increasing. So as we said before, partnerships are increasing. Activities like this, conferences with another universities in the other part of the world, reducing costs are increasing. There is also a reduction of bureaucracy and paperwork and documents to migrate, to travel, to know another researchers, and the communities of researchers became more instant and more an increase of collaboration and union. I want to talk about this beautiful example because there was this scientist at the University of Pittsburgh that discovered a new finding about the COVID during the crisis. And in the ordinary circumstances, they have to write a scientific article and publish it this scientific article, journal article, in order to know, to let know all the other community of scientifics the new find. But this was an emergency, so they have no time to do this, and they were just, okay, we don't have time, and this is priority because there are lives of people that depends on it. So we just share the information without the paperwork, and that's all. And they say like, okay, it's pretty cool, right, to be part of a global enterprise, okay? And I think that this feeling, this sentimental mood of to do research in order to think bigger than me as a scientist, bigger than me as a university, but but believing in a humankind or acting like a humankind with a main objective bigger than all of us. So this online teaching, learning, online research, and online exchange of information is actually can seen as opportunity because we have more flexible possibilities, more flexible times. We can get access to hybrid learning. It means that in the future, maybe, okay, coronavirus disappears, but maybe we can keep all the instruments that we learn to use in this period because it's always something more and not less. The mix of synchronous learning with asynchronous learning is also positive because it means inclusion for all the targets of students or researchers that maybe because of the condition of student workers, of the condition of student parents, don't have the time to be physically and in precise time on lessons. And synchronous asynchronous learning, it shows that it's very positive. It's positive things for all of them. And we have new tools and systems, and we are developing new tools and systems furthermore. We have the expectation of increase this innovation in teaching pedagogies. So this is not something that has to decrease the quality and decrease the research, but this is something that have to improve the technology and to improve the way we are communicate. And this means inclusion for the people and the targets and the person that maybe were excluded by digital divide, by digital conditions, by media literacy, and by a lot of reasons that in this moment are improving their skills and their infrastructure situation. So we arrived to the conclusion that actually now academy is learning how to optimize the work and how to collaborate and as an academy, a global academy, and not just a local perspective. We learned that it is not necessary to stay permanently on crisis to be permanently in contact. It means that even if coronavirus disappears, as we said, we need to continue to be in touch because we show on this month, on this year, that actually we can do research and we can do collaboration without spend a lot of time of organizations and paperwork and all of the bureaucracy things that maybe in the past was a problem. There are problems in the other side of the world that need collective effort to be solved. It means that the corona teaches in this time that we are not alone in the world, and if something happens in the other part of the world, maybe it's something happening also here. So we can work together in order to get a solution, not just for them or not just for them, but for us. So trying to see a nationalist label into scientific research every time is complicated because we are in a globalization context, we are in an informational era, we are in a context that is not more possible to think just about a nation and university, a local part. We are just global students and global researchers. And I want to finish this with this beautiful quote When writing in Chinese, the word crisis is composed of two characters. One represents danger and the other represents always an opportunity. Thank you so much.